Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jayani Murray, and I am an 8th grade student at Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School here in Asbury Park. I love growing up in Asbury Park. I have my whole life. But the truth is, it's not that easy. Gun violence has taken the lives of my cousin, a family friend, and I worry that one day it could take mine.
Gun violence on the news has taken the lives of my cousin, a family friend, and I worry that one day it could take mine.
Take cover under desks. We have set aside time to stop learning and participate in active shooter drills. Education is a gateway. It sets us on a path to a better future, towards better opportunities. But how can I focus in class if I have to worry about a potential shooter? I am 14 years old. I want to play softball with my friends. I want to walk through my neighborhood safely. I want to be able to live the normal life of a 14-year-old. But in our world today, the definition of normal seems to have changed. So if being a normal 14-year-old means standing up against gun violence, count me in. If it means standing up to the Congress members and senators in Washington, D.C., who are refusing to take action on gun violence, count me in.
Well done. You're doing great, by the way. You're doing great.
And if it means speaking up for a safer communities and a better education, count me in. Thank you, Governor Murphy, for fighting to help students like me be safe in our communities across the state. I would now like to introduce Governor Murphy.
Great job. I want to say you did a great job.
Thank you.
Great job. Wow. Wow. Be prepared, everybody, for this entire event to go right downhill after that. There is nothing that we're going to be able to say that will top that, Jayoni.
Thank you.
Wow. My Lord. Good morning, everybody. By the way, Mom, right here in the front row, Mrs. Murray. So Murphy to Murray right here. Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. Acting Commissioner Dr. Repillette, it's good to be back in your old neighborhood here.
Yes, it is.
What a treat. To all the elected officials here, mayors, members of council, a particular shout out to Eric Hoteling because the General Assembly has signed and passed a whole bunch of gun laws, and I know the Senate will get to them sooner than later, but congratulations for everything you did in that respect and your colleagues, right? And to all the other dignitaries, whenever I see the red T-shirts, I know I'm in good company, Mom. So thank you all and other organizations for being here today. Also members not just of council in Asbury Park and elected officials from Monmouth County, but also members of the Board of Education. Thank you all so much for welcoming us here today. And by the way, it is, I think, appropriate this week of all weeks to be in a school named after the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. God bless and rest his soul. We were all together a few days ago commemorating the 50th anniversary of his passing. It's extraordinary. I mean, I remember it as if it were yesterday. I was with my big sister. She pulled the car over and burst into tears when we got the news on the radio that night. And it's extraordinary to think about not just the 50 years that have passed, but the struggle that he led for his, by the way, he's 39 years old when he passed, which is kind of hard to believe, but the struggles that he led for his adult life in so many respects. Here we are 50 years later in many of the same struggles. And so it's in his honor and legacy that we march on. One more time, we got to thank Jayoni for an extraordinary introduction. And by the way, I've got a 14-year-old, so this is not just abstract for me. This is very real. And we're going to do something very important today, but I think I'm joined by the adults up here when I say the next generation is going to get done as it relates to guns, what we have failed to get done, particularly in Congress and nationally. So hats off to you and everyone else who's standing up, right? It's always good. I'll take any excuse to be in Asbury Park. I'm a Monmouth County guy, so this is right down the road for me. This is a city on the rise, and I have to repeat that I want to be your partner to see it safe and prospering for all residents, particularly our youngest residents. It's an honor to be here today, not just with the acting commissioner, but to be here with Attorney General Gabir Graywall to my right and State Police Colonel Pat Callahan to announce a new tool that will allow residents to see for the first time the direct impact of gun violence in our communities. And as painful as that may be, we're going to shine a light on the data at long last. Asbury Park is a community, I need not say this, that has lived with the impacts of gun violence. Just 6 weeks ago, a 10-year-old boy was killed in a shooting. This past weekend, 5 people were rushed to the hospital, the result of a drive-by shooting. But no one should be lulled into a false sense that gun crimes are some other town's problems or that illegal guns don't impact their community. We are doing this today for our residents and leaders to have a fuller understanding of the impact of gun violence on their own communities and the effects of firearms trafficking into New Jersey. This morning, in a few minutes, I'm going to sign an executive order to help make this information publicly available and accessible. Going forward, the Department of Law and Public Safety's website will publish on a monthly basis the numbers of gun crimes by municipality, the type of gun used, and the type of crime committed, among other information. We will also issue quarterly reports that will break down state by state, and this is really important, where the guns used in the commission of a crime in New Jersey originated from. And that'll all be done for the first time. And I'll tell you right now, if it means naming and shaming other states, that's exactly what we're going to do. There are 2, and there are probably more, and I'm an optimist and our best days are ahead of us, let me say that in so many respects, but there are 2 disturbing facts that drive us to this action. First, there were 485 gun deaths in New Jersey in 2016. Now, that's the last year, at least I've got the data. Secondly, we know that at least 80%, I think it's fair to say, Colonel, of gun crimes in New Jersey are committed with a gun obtained from out of state, with many of them, pretty obvious point, but many of them coming from states with weaker gun laws. We'll leave aside for a moment the federal push to allow the least common denominator state law to drive habits such as concealed carry. That's not why we're here today, but this is a step in the direction of making sure everybody knows what the facts are. Because of our current gun laws, we have one of the nation's lowest gun-related mortality rates. But that should not give us any measure of solace, and we shouldn't go around spiking the football or patting ourselves on the back just yet. Our goal must be to get that number to 0. Any death due to gun violence, particularly of a young person, but of any person, is one death too many. And we cannot be blind to the fact that our gun laws are only as good as those in the states around us. Guns don't understand the concept of state lines, but those who purchase them do. As I have mentioned before, the day before the tragedy at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, Attorney General Graywall announced the arrests of traffickers bringing guns into Camden from Ohio. This information that we're going to, easy now, we're still here. This information that we're going to unleash by this executive order will be vital to this new multi-state effort that we started, States for Gun Safety, which I was proud to help organize and inaugurate in the days after Parkland, along with New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, Massachusetts, and Puerto Rico, and more to come. Stay tuned. This information will help further our regional efforts to stem the trafficking of firearms and also provide a base for new research into the public policy solutions we need to end the violence. We put, as I've said to many of you, we put a couple of $1 million into our budget explicitly to fund gun research, particularly smart gun research. You'll note the coalition we have in the states for gun safety. Those states, as I mentioned, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, Massachusetts, and Puerto Rico. I'm not, by the way, I didn't just take a side on the statehood discussions in Puerto Rico, but importantly, I want to remind our president that Puerto Rico is in the United States of America. One of those pesky little details you have to command if you're going to be president. Just want to say that you will note from those states, in fairness, those states have pretty strong gun laws. You know, we are, I think, proudly at the head of the American class, but those are not low-end gun laws. So our hope is that between this data that we're going to all be able to see and hopefully expanding that coalition, and with folks like Jayoni keeping our Congress people, particularly the Republicans, feet to the fire in Washington, ultimately we cobble together the road forward that we need to find. I might add, at least in one of these states, Massachusetts, it's led by a Republican governor. So it's, you know, we're beginning to see that this isn't just one side or the aisle. The reasonable people on both sides of the aisle, God willing, can come together and forge smarter solutions. The Attorney General's office, in coordination with the New Jersey State Police and local law enforcement, works hard every day to keep our streets, our neighborhoods, our schools safe, and to combat the trafficking of guns. These efforts are never ending, and we hope this effort will shine a new light on their importance. I've never been around anything that is more open-ended and unending than public safety. There's no moment when you can spike the football and say the game ended. It is these gentlemen and their colleagues work 24 hours a day to improve what will always likely be an imperfect reality. So gun violence is not a Newark problem, it's not a Trenton problem or a Camden problem or an Asbury Park problem, but an entire state of New Jersey problem. We all share in the burden of fighting the scourge of gun crimes together. And certainly we all must continue the push for common sense new laws to keep our communities safe and to keep guns out of the wrong hands. I look forward to working with, I mentioned earlier, and giving Eric and his colleagues a shout out, looking forward to working with our friends and partners in the Senate to secure the passage of the package of legislation which the Assembly has recently approved. And by the way, that included, among other things, sensible limits on magazine capacity, red flag legislation, among others. So I'm sitting ready with the pen in hand, ready to sign those bills into law. And as I've said time and again, our administration is going to lead based on facts and science and not on politics. This will be just another set of facts that we sign in a moment that we can use to guide our current and future efforts. With that, it is now my distinct pleasure to ask the Attorney General, Gurbir Grewal, to come up to the podium and say a few words. Gurbir, honored.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Jayoni. That was wonderful. Those remarks were terrific, and it is going downhill from there.
Amen. Please help continue the descent.
Let me just start by saying that as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for New Jersey, as the Attorney General, I'm firmly committed to ending the scourge of gun violence in the state. As the Governor made plain, gun violence is a threat to all of our residents, and it's a threat to our law enforcement officers. So we are doing everything possible to stop it and to stop the illegal flow of firearms into this state. Since taking over in January, I'm proud of the efforts that we've undertaken on the law enforcement side of the House, in particular working with Colonel Callahan and the New Jersey State Police. We dismantled a gun trafficking organization that was bringing firearms, as the Governor alluded to, from Ohio into Camden. 17 firearms to include AK-47s, prohibited assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, firearms that were being used in furtherance of gun crimes and in furtherance of drug crimes. And that effort to take down that gun trafficking ring was a collaborative effort. It brought together federal partners, it brought together state partners, county partners, municipal partners, and it showed what we can do in law enforcement by coming together and pooling our efforts to stop the flow of these types of weapons into this state. And I'm also going to say it's the future of what we're going to do at the Attorney General's office moving forward. These are the types of collaborations that are underway that the Colonel and I are working on with our partners across federal levels and across the state and across the counties in this state. And I think through those types of efforts, you'll see additional announcements like the ones we made back in February. But I wish I could say that all those efforts alone are ending gun violence and the flow of illegal firearms into this state. They're not. The numbers bear out the reality of the tragic stories that the governor shared with you this morning. Asbury Park is a town, a city of 15,000 people. In 2017, there were 8 shootings, one that led to a death. New Jersey does have some of the toughest gun laws. You can't walk into a store in New Jersey, present your driver's license, and walk out with whatever firearms you want. We have strict background check processes. We have limitations on the types of weapons that can and can't be sold, the types of ammunition that can't and cannot be sold in this state. And I know the governor, along with the legislature, is working to tighten those gun laws and make them even stronger. But unfortunately, that alone is not going to solve the problem. The issue, as was mentioned this morning, is that too many other states make it too easy for people to buy firearms. Let's take the example of South Carolina. That state does not ban assault weapons and does not require any special permit to buy a gun. South Carolina's methods of dealing with guns is a problem for New Jersey because guns sold in South Carolina end up on the streets of New Jersey and are used to perpetrate gun crimes. In fact, more than 80% of the crime guns that we recover in this state originate from other states. So I'm proud to have Governor Murphy as a partner who cares so deeply about confronting gun violence in New Jersey and is so committed to stopping the flow of illegal firearms into this state. That's why I'm glad to stand with him this morning as he announces an order calling on the Department of Law and Public Safety to look at ways to make this problem public. Simply put, everyone in this state has a right to know how common gun violence is. They have a right to know what sort of weapons are being used and found on our streets, and importantly, where they're coming from. That's why the Colonel and I have already had a number of discussions. We have this data. This is part of what we do, but you should have this data as well. You have a right to know this. So moving forward, every month, the state police and the Attorney General's office will publish information to the public on the volume of gun crimes, the type of guns used, the number of shooting victims, the towns where these crimes occurred, the offenses charged. And because the public has a right to know on a quarterly basis, we'll also publish information about where these guns are originating from. Who are the source states for these guns? We're doing everything in our power to make sure that the scourge of gun violence stops. And we hope that our reports lead other states to do the same. We'll only start to solve this problem when we work together. And I'm confident that by coming together, we can work towards a reality where gun violence is no longer a plague to our society. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Superintendent and Colonel of the State Police, Pat Callahan.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just take a minute to echo both the governor's and general's remarks. And Gianni, it was somewhat disheartening as a father and a trooper to stand here and listen to the concerns and fears of a 14-year-old. My greatest concern, I think, was if I forgot my gym clothes when I was in high school and the fear that ran through me. But yours is a legitimate one, a real one. And she's still an honor student despite all of that. So, great job. With regards to the reporting requirements and the information that Governor Murphy's about to sign, the state police stands poised to assist in this effort. Our Fusion Center is viewed as a model around the country. It's our Regional Operations Intelligence Center. They will be ready to assist in this information sharing. I'm pleased to report that a couple of weeks ago, I was with colonels from around the entire United States at a national conference, and every one of those states looks to New Jersey as to what we're doing with crime gun intelligence, how are we sharing information, particularly to what Governor Murphy referred to at that multi-state initiative, that the criminals don't mind that the Delaware River is in between us and Pennsylvania. They don't care about the Hudson River. They'll pay the toll to go over the George Washington Bridge. So this regional effort, we have to start looking at crime and terrorism regionally, and that's what part of this multi-state gun safety initiative is about. And to sit around a table with the superintendents from around the entire country, and when they ask, Pat, what's New Jersey doing? That's a special place to be in, and that's not by accident. That's because of the vision of people like the governor, the attorney general, Commissioner Repillette. Certainly I'd add Gianni to that list as well. So it's a special place to be. I'm honored and humbled to be there when they ask that question, what is New Jersey doing about that? And I can assure you that the executive order that's signed today, as the attorney general said, this is all of our problems, and the more that you know about the crimes and the guns that are coming into New Jersey, the better suited we'll be to prevent it and certainly try and reduce gun violence across the state, because the data shows sometimes there's a gun used in Newark, 2 weeks later that same gun's in Trenton, 3 weeks later that gun's in Plainfield, and that's a reality for us that we need to be really in tune with those community guns on top of the ones that are coming up from states all around the country. So I praise and applaud the governor for this, yet another initiative that the entire country is looking to New Jersey and saying that's the way we should be doing it. So thank you. At this, I'll bring up another phenomenal partner in this effort, especially as it pertains to school safety and just education as a whole, Commissioner Lamont Repillette.
Good morning, everyone, but I would like to start off by thanking the governor for bringing me back home. It's nice to be back in Asbury Park. But more importantly, though, thank you for giving Asbury Park the platform to showcase phenomenal students that we have in our district.
Amen to that.
Thank you. And also thank you for providing a tool today we're going to have that will actually highlight some of the challenges that we do have in this phenomenal city. So thank you, Governor, and your office for really being thoughtful. The issue of gun violence has been integral to so many school security situations and has posed a real threat to our students' ability to feel safe at school. And her story was an example. As a parent and educator, I know that this issue is current in people's minds, particularly in the light of the horrific tragedies that have occurred all too frequently in schools and communities throughout this country. Gun violence and school safety are not partisan or political problems. Regardless of party, race, creed, the senseless, vicious deaths wrought by guns brings us together in anger and mourning. This is why I'm both personally and professionally committed to creating a school environment for students where they feel safe. Last month, I participated in the city of Newark's March for Our Lives with countless young people, and Asbury Park hosted an event as well. And our Asbury Park students did a wonderful job there as well. The strength, courage, and wisdom shown by young leaders throughout the country have inspired us all and brought us together in advocacy and action. They are determined as we are today that these awful incidents will never happen again. It is imperative that we listen to our student leaders and empower them to inform decisions made regarding their safety. While we cannot control individual student behaviors, as the governor said, we're not going to stand here and spike the football tonight. However, smart planning, preventative tactics, and responsible gun policies will bring us closer to ensuring students and educators' safety in our schools and communities. Here are just some of the ways that New Jersey will remain committed to this issue. Next month, I will be attending a school safety academy in Indiana with educational commissioners from across the country as part of a national task force. The objective is to bring back additional school safety information and turnkey to my staff, particularly in the Office of School Preparedness and Emergency Planning, which is staffed by retired state and local enforcement officers. This Office of School Preparedness and Emergency Planning will continue, I use the word continue, to partner with the Attorney General's office, the state police, Homeland Security, to provide guidance, professional development, technical assistance to over 600 school districts. As co-chair of the School Security Subcommittee for the New Jersey Department of Homeland Security and Preparedness, I am dedicated to working with Governor Murphy and our New Jersey schools to provide continued attention and bold action related to this critical issue. The Department of Education is encouraged that Governor Murphy provide additional $66 million in school safety funds for the fiscal year 2019 budget, which will allow school districts to develop, advance, and enhance new and the current security strategies. President John F. Kennedy stated, "There are risks and costs to action, but they are far less than the long-range risk of comfortable inaction." I would like to thank the young leaders like Gianni throughout the state of New Jersey, state of New Jersey, and Governor Murphy for their call to action. And thank you.
Thanks, Lamont. We should all sign this. Sure. To prove that we were here. An extraordinary quote by John Kennedy. And by the way, we have to all acknowledge himself a victim of gun violence. So no matter where you turn. I read an article this morning about Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. Again, we all remember what Robert Kennedy said the night that Martin Luther King died. Do you think he knew that 2 months later he himself would be a victim of gun violence? It's extraordinary. Before we sign, maybe take a couple of quick questions. Brian? Brian, I can barely see you. I'm not sure why we set you up all the way back there, but...
It goes back to the Christie days.
Next question. Sorry. Yeah.
Governor, once you get this quarterly information on other state weapons, out-of-state weapons,
Yep.
what do you plan to do with it personally? Will you call up governors? Will you go out on a soapbox? What would you like to do with that specific?
Yeah, it's a great question. We were debating and discussing this morning. If it was done safely and the superintendent of the local school district or the principal weren't upset, I sure wouldn't mind seeing some of the young activism showing up at the state capitol and standing on their front step and saying, enough already. That wouldn't bother me, again, if it was done safely and moms and dads were okay with that. I suspect we will probably, Brian, get active. I'm not going to get into the details, but there's at least one state we approached on this States for Gun Safety who said no. My gut tells me that if they're on this list as a high source state, that's going to be a tough conversation between the chief executives. I defer to either Gerbir or Pat about specific action through either of your offices that you could envision taking.
Sure. As I mentioned during my remarks, this is information that, from a law enforcement perspective, we track. We use this information when we do the crime gun intelligence that the Colonel spoke about, and maybe he could add to link up weapons and to find the source of those weapons. So we use it proactively in our criminal investigations. But what we're doing now is sharing it publicly, as we said during the course of the remarks earlier, to prompt a conversation, to prompt action, to have people realize that this is a pervasive problem in this state and across the country, and that there are 7 or 8 large source states where where weapons are coming into New Jersey illegally from, and action needs to be taken there. And again, much like the same way we are beginning to share data at the Attorney General's office on opioid overdoses across the state, identifying where those overdoses are occurring, where the Narcan saves are occurring, That's to prompt a conversation. That's to prompt action. In the same way, we want to prompt action when our citizens are dying, when crime guns are being used on streets in neighborhoods like Asbury Park and other parts of the state. So again, it's a call to action. It's a call to provoke change in those states where the gun laws are not as strict as they are here. Colonel?
Thank you, General. I would just add that, again, an instance where in New Jersey, we had to have a cultural shift in the way law enforcement handles recovered weapons. So about 2 years ago, we started treating every single recovered weapon as if it were used in a homicide. That's somewhat hard for law enforcement to get through your mind when a trooper finds, let's say, a 9mm on a motor vehicle stop, and it might, not get relayed down for evidence. But now, within 24 hours, that weapon is in our lab, and generally within 48 hours now, that gun's been tested for latent fingerprints, DNA swabs in case there's any DNA in the barrel or in or around the weapon, and then any shell casings that may have come from that weapon are married up in our ballistics, our national, it's called NIMIT, our ballistics database, to see if that weapon was used. And we've had some tremendous success stories. So that's just another layer of what we're doing and how we treat weapons, knowing that, again, as I spoke earlier about those community weapons. And I also think there may be a misconception out there that there's truckloads of weapons that are coming into New Jersey. I think the more realistic thing is happening are those straw purchases in those other states are going down and just buying maybe 2 or 3, in some instances just one weapon, and coming over again, whether that's the Delaware, up the Turnpike, then into Hudson, into New York. It's not that old movie from the 70s where you open up the tractor trailer and there's 1,000 weapons. It's just not happening. But that's why everybody in this room knows what the ripple effect and the tragedy of just one handgun, whether it's a 6-shooter of 38 special revolver or an AK-47, one life from one round. It's tragic. So, the state police, again, with our weapons trafficking unit, the case that we had that the general spoke of with regard to sometimes that one traffic stop in a city or on an interstate and you recover one gun. That one actually got broken open because of a West Virginia trooper who stopped a person in this ring and just called back to one of our detectives. That little bit of extra step in police work is what blew that case wide open. Again, collaboration with a trooper on a road in West Virginia tied all the way back to Ohio and guns being used to commit crimes in the city of Camden.
Amen. I just said one other quick thing. It's they've got the information. This is now a question of putting it out and shining a light on it. And so that's not by accident. So we're gonna hopefully by doing that we can call folks out. Other members of the press, please. Yeah, the first report. Good question. The first monthly report is going to be up in early May, so it'll be April's data. The quarterly, I assume, it'll be for the second quarter in July.
We're aiming to do to work back and do January through May and do the first quarter report at the same time. We have the information.
Please. Hi, Jim. I also could barely see you, but I know you're there. That's all right.
Do you plan on releasing as part of the data the names of the people charged or suspects with these crimes? And are you also looking into making any stricter or stiffer penalties for gun crimes in the state of New Jersey?
On the former, I'll let these gentlemen answer that. On the latter, we're trying to pass stronger gun laws, sign stronger gun laws, which I will sign. So as a separate matter from this particular executive order or from the gun legislation that the Assembly has passed that, God willing, the Senate will get to soon and I'll sign, we've activated a criminal justice sentencing commission that was activated, I think, about 6 weeks ago. It was dormant for the past 8 years. And this will be considered along with a lot of other considerations within that bipartisan commission. On names?
We're not putting out names with these reports.
Yeah, there are no names associated with this.
By law, we do put out names at the time of arrest. So we are required to put out certain information when an individual is arrested. That information will be out there, but for purposes of this report, it's to show where the crimes are occurring and what frequency and what types of weapons are being used. That's not the purpose of this particular report. the name information exists out there, whether it's an arrest in Essex County, they will have put out that information already. So this report is focused on the data that we outlined earlier.
Joe, please take a couple more. Yeah, I'm not sure I've got an answer on how it was devised, but the notion was, first of all, among other things, we've got taxes and fees that are literally been in the same place, I think, since in some cases the 1960s. So it's an updating and modernizing it. And I think our philosophy on top of that was to let's get at the stuff that is still available that we think are more frequently than not involved in gun crimes. We can get you. I'll get you Dan, or can follow up and give you how we built up to the $1.4 million. Someone else over here? Yes, ma'am. On the former, it's the first I'm hearing of it. I'm sure there are a number of suits out there, so I've got no comment because I have no knowledge of it. How about the second part of the question, which is
The registry?
no, the lawsuit I have no knowledge of. The registry, yeah.
Well, I
don't think that's public.
we don't have such a registry. Is the question, should we have one?
We don't have it, and you're asking, should we have one? First time I've ever been asked, so can we come back to you? I'm 0 for 2. I apologize on that one. Matt.
Is there anything in this plan that's not already available if you request it, if the reporter requested, or is this new information that you're compiling in this already exists?
So this is overwhelmingly information that they've got that's not public knowledge. It's a good question. Is there any part of this that doesn't exist today that we're going to, even in private? I don't think the answer is no to that, right?
No, this is all information we have, and we're just being transparent about the issue and putting it out and making it publicly available absent a request.
I asked the general whether or not we were the state, the number one state to have done this, and I don't think we're qualified enough to say that, although Pat gave you the implication that we're pretty much, we might be.
Again, I think we may, based upon the conference I was at a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
people are looking at New Jersey as the forefront of this issue.
We think the more information, the better. David? Sorry to run out on you yesterday, I apologize, but one of your colleagues made note that I got out of there very quickly, and I just want you to know I have the same shoes on today. So this question better not go on too long, or I'm... So I can leave, please.
It's actually for Sakia, if I could ask.
I'm sorry?
For Sakia, is it?
No, Gianni.
I'm sorry.
Come on in.
So you see all these grown-ups here talking about these new changes that are some information that's supposed to help cure the scourge of gun violence. What would you say to them that you would like to see to make your school and Asbury a little safer?
I think we would need to crack down on gun violence more because a lot of kids from my school, they see guns every day, and it's crazy how I go to school with kids who could go to their house and see a gun or be around guns every day. And these kids could be out in the street and a shooting can happen, they can get shot. So a lot of things should really change in Asbury with the gun violence. Like, we should get
Great job.
we should start cracking down on gun violence because it's really hurting the kids in Asbury Park, and it's not good.
Amen. God bless you. Great job. It ain't getting any better than that. I'm going to go sign here. Gianni, well done. That was awesome. Can I have this? Because I'm going to do something else. I have an idea for you. Come on, absolutely.
You need to get involved with the city. Yvonne, come on over. My lady.
Someone